Well, we're going to primarily study the Psalms chapter 7 today, but I'm going to start with kind of a review of a couple of the other chapters.
Mick,
Yeah.
if you move closer to the camera won't pick you up where
Oh.
you're at.
Okay, this
For the
way?
people online.
Okay,
There you go.
this ought to do it, huh?
There you
Okay.
go.
The last week, Jeff started the study of Psalms with chapter 2. And then if you're here on Sunday night, Alan gave a great talk about just kind of an interpretation of what the Psalms mean. And so if you haven't had a chance yet, go online and look at both of those lessons. They were really good. But I want to start out with kind of a review of Psalms 1 and 2 before we get into Psalm 7, because there's some good lessons there. And I know some of the comments that were made at the end of the lesson last week about world leaders, and kind of hit home with my thinking too. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit. So I think we'll start by reading Psalms 1 and 2, and then have a little discussion about world leaders, U.S. leaders, and church leaders, and things like that. Could I get someone to read Psalms 1 for me? Chad, would you do that?
Where are we at?
Psalms chapter 1,
Okay, first one?
1 through 6.
Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful, but his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law he meditates day and night, meditates day and night. He shall be like a tree planted by the rivers of water that brings forth its fruit in its season, whose leaf also shall not wither, and whatever he does shall prosper. The ungodly are not so, but are like the chaff of which the winds drive away. Therefore the ungodly shall not stand in the judgment, nor sinners in the congregation of the righteous. For the Lord knows the way of the righteous, but the way of the ungodly shall perish.
Yeah. Now, you might interpret that as you reap what you sow, and sometimes that's in this life, but it doesn't seem like it's always that way. So, some people have an evil life, and it seems like they never get corrected. I know at the end of the class last week, I walked out right as Alan started making his comments. But you think about Hitler, you think about Mussolini, you think about some of the leaders in this world. Saddam Hussein, they had tremendous power. They did all kinds of things. But at the end, like Saddam Hussein was in a hole in the ground. Remember, he was down in that spider hole in the ground? What a fall. Hitler was in a hole in the ground also, right? Just some crazy things happened to them. And but not all world leaders got the retribution in this life. Some of the retribution happens later on. That got me thinking about some of our leaders in this country also. I know when I was born in 1944. The first president I remember was Harry Truman. And Harry was the buck stops here sign. And I liked Harry. But obviously I didn't know that much at a young age. But he seemed like he was real straightforward. It never seemed like there was any bad behavior in his life and in things that he did. And things have changed quite a bit over the years from early life. I know that many of our first presidents were, or presidents that I was aware of in my lifetime, were war heroes. I like Ike. Ike was, tremendous war hero, led the Allies. This week I read the Wikipedia on Bush Sr. Bush Sr. was a pilot in his early 20s in World War II, shot down a couple times, got a lot of awards for valor and heroism, and even JFK. I don't know if you ever saw the movie PT 109, was it?
Yep.
In the book. A tremendous hero, a tremendous courage by JFK. And like some of the heroes of the Bible, they're kind of a mixed bag. David is considered one of our greatest biblical heroes, yet he was involved in premeditated murder. It's hard for us to reconcile that in our minds. That's not the kind of thing that we contemplate and get involved with. Yet some of our biblical heroes, while they showed great courage and did tremendous things, they had some real shortcomings too in their life. I know that a lot of times we mention Solomon. Solomon was so wise and wrote tremendous books with tremendous teaching. Yet late in life, Solomon got completely off track, got involved with strange gods, and just did lots of things that we would not connect with wisdom and with good behavior. Yet, I like to read late scripture in Ecclesiastes. If you've read the book of Ecclesiastes, it tells all these things that are happening and all these lessons. And at the end, though, chapter 12, verse 13 and 14, the conclusion, when all has been heard, is fear God and keep his commandments, because this applies to every person. For God will bring every act to judgment, everything which is hidden, whether it is good or evil. So it seems like, at least at this point, Solomon had a good reconciliation in his mind, that maybe a lot of the things he had done in his life were not good. And anyway, I thought that was interesting. When I think about our leaders today in our country, it seems like the thought processes and the decision making is a lot more confusing than it was years ago. I'm not sure why that is. It used to be that we didn't always do right, but we kind of always knew what was right, whether we did what was right or not at all times. But today, with all the trans issues, all the various issues that are going on in this world, our political leaders don't seem to make good logical decisions many times. And I'm not sure why that is. But I do think the book of Psalms teaches that our leaders can take off in bad directions. Another saying that I thought about this week is a saying called "Power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. This is a proverbial saying that as a person's power increases, their moral sense diminishes. Absolute monarchies are those in which all power is given to, or as is more often the case, taken by the leader. Examples of monarchs who corrupted their power include Roman emperors who declared themselves gods, and Napoleon Bonaparte, who declared himself an emperor. That saying is attributed to first Baron Acton, is the name I came up with, 1834 to 1902. But I think that there's some sense to that saying, in that too much power, too much praise, too much money are difficult things to deal with. Doesn't mean that they're necessarily always bad to have power, to have authority, to have money. What it means is there's problems that come along with that, and there's risks that come along with that that make it difficult to continue in the right direction. I wanted to have someone read Psalm chapter 2 also, and then we'll kind of take off from there and go into the 7th chapter. Larry, would you read that for us, please?
Why do the nations rage and the people plot a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, and the rulers take counsel together against the Lord and against his appointed, saying, let us break their bonds in pieces and cast away their cords from us. He who sits in the heavens shall laugh, the Lord shall hold them in derision. Then he shall speak to them in his wrath and distress them in his deep displeasure. Yet I have set my king on my holy hill in Zion. I will declare the decree. The Lord has said to me, you are my son. Today I have begotten you. Ask of me, and I will give you the nations for your inheritance, and the ends of the earth for your possession. You shall break them with a rod of iron. You shall dash them in pieces like a potter's vessel. Now therefore be wise, O kings. Be instructed, you judges of the earth. Serve the Lord with fear and rejoice with trembling. Kiss the Son, lest he be angry, and you perish in the way, when his wrath is kindled but a little. Blessed are those who put their trust in him.
Yeah, again, this was the lesson from last week, and one of the primary points that I got from this lesson was that one is that the followers of God, the Jewish people, are going to be, they're going to have problems in this world. Many of the worldly leaders are going to be against the anointed. I think that's true in history, and I think that's true today. Many of the world leaders do not respect Christianity, and that's going to continue to get more pronounced as we go forward. Also, it taught that world leaders who do not follow God's will not have a good end. And whether that's in this life or the next life, things are going to change. Let's go over to Psalms 7, which is actually the lesson for today, is chapter 7. We often remember David for his successes, but his life was difficult before and after becoming king. Following his victory over the Philistine giant Goliath, David drew the praise of the Israelites, who declared, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s. You can imagine how that was received by Saul. Although the women who sang these lines meant to be an encouragement, King Saul was insulted. It's expressing his anger, he said, they have ascribed to David 10,000s, and to me they have ascribed only thousands. Now what more can he have but the kingdom? From that time onward, David became a target. Eventually, he was forced to flee for his life from Saul, and Saul became somewhat unstable. This lesson will focus on Psalm 7, which is titled A Meditation of David, which he sang to the Lord concerning the words of Cush, a Benjamite. Indicates scholars are unsure of the reference because Cush is described as a Benjamite. He was possibly one of King Saul's servants who pursued David in the wilderness, a period during which David continually asserted his innocence. An alternative view is that the psalm records David's reaction to the one who reported the death of his son Absalom. Both situations were extremely trying for David, but whether either of these events served as the background of Psalm 7 is uncertain. What is not unclear is that the psalm is a lament. David is crying out to God for deliverance. He's crying out for help. He believed God to be a just judge. Psalms and Proverbs and Ecclesiastes and Job and James are some of my favorite books. And it's because they're real direct in their teaching of right and wrong. And I guess my mindset is I'm able to understand when teaching is direct like that. I think that was, again, to the older generation, we're used to, we were kind of brought up with teaching in that regard in our schooling and in our lifestyle, which is probably a little bit different than today. It seems a little bit more confusing today. He believed God to be a just judge. Consequently, he trusted God would distinguish between the upright and the wicked. Because God knows those who are his, we may draw a similar conclusion. No matter how difficult the situations we face, we must place our trust in God. If you would, let's turn to Psalms chapter 7. And I think I'll read that in the sections like they have it in this study. Starting at verse 1. O Lord my God, in you I have taken refuge. Save me from all those who pursue me and deliver me. Or he will tear my soul like a lion, dragging me away while there is none to deliver. O Lord my God, if I have done this, well, let's stop there, 1 and 2. David appealed to God to help him endure the persecution faced. Whether this plea was necessarily because of pressure from King Saul, from the Philistines from whom David fled, or from the attempted coup by Absalom, it's clear that he was feeling the pressure. Something bad was going to happen, and he was reaching out for help. His tone kind of changes when you get to verse 3. It says, "Oh my God, if I have done this, if there is injustice in my hands, or if I have rewarded evil to my friend, or have plundered him who without cause was my adversary, Let the enemy pursue my soul and overtake it, and let him trample my life down to the ground. That's kind of a change in the message there. David felt like he had not mistreated his enemies, but he's making a statement here. I wasn't quite sure how to interpret this statement, in that it's like he's saying, if I've done these things, punish me for doing them. If I've done these bad things, it seems like I would deserve some correction to take place. But it really just kind of sets up the next verses where he justifies himself. Start on verse 6. Arise, O Lord, in your anger. Lift up yourself against the rage of my adversaries, and arouse yourself for me. You have appointed judgment. Let the assembly of the peoples encompass you, and over them return on high. David did not doubt whether God was aware of his situation, but awareness alone was no longer enough. David wanted help, and he wanted to specifically for God to intervene and to bring him some relief. And as far as he was concerned, God had to do more than see the wickedness of his foes. It was time to stand against them. The reference to the judgment God commanded may well recall a promise made to David. Regardless, God is completely just and will act in a manner consistent with his nature. I want to flip over to 2 Peter chapter 3. Second Peter chapter 3, starting at verse 9. The Lord is not slow about his promise, as some count slowness, but is patient toward you, not wishing for any to perish, but for all to come to repentance. But the day of the Lord will come like a thief, in which the heavens will pass away with a roar, and the elements will be destroyed with intense heat, and the earth and its works will be burned up. Since all these things are to be destroyed in this way, what sort of people ought you to be in holy conduct and godliness, looking for and hastening the coming of the day of God, because of which the heavens will be destroyed by burning, and the elements will melt with intense heat. But according to his promise, we are looking for new heavens and a new earth in which righteousness dwells. Ultimately, God is going to act. And we may, as David was doing, we may pray for relief, we may pray for help, but we won't always get the answer that we like or that we would prefer in this life. I do believe that good behavior results in good things happening in this life, but not at every minute and not at every instance, not at everything that happens in your life. You're going to have some problems that go on for long periods of time. And that's just the mix of life on this earth. But ultimately, kind of like we mentioned with the leaders, ultimately the good behavior is rewarded. The bad behavior results in its treatment also. And some of that happens now and some of it happens later. The longer you live, the more you see that happening. You've probably all had good bosses in places where you work. And you've had experiences where you've seen where good behavior by you and by them resulted in good things. But you've seen the opposite happen in this life too. And the longer we live, the more we see that. You know, I'm involved with a lot of activity at the camp, and we're seeing a lot of concern in the young people at the camp today that we didn't see years ago. Many of the young people today, especially junior high and high school, are really searching for what is the meaning of life, what is life all about, and something to believe in. Now, obviously the church kids are not as affected by that as the non-church kids, but even the kids within the congregations that come to camp, many of them are looking for something to believe in, and they're kind of confused with life. It's a scary situation in this world today. And if you just watch the 6 o'clock news on any network channel, and you watch it very long, you see that the messages that were being taught from the newsmakers are really confusing about what life is about and what's right and what's wrong in this world. And that's disappointing. I don't watch much news anymore. Okay, let me get back to I'll go back to chapter 7, verse 11. God is a righteous judge and a God who has indignation every day. If a man does not repent, he will sharpen his sword. He will bend his bow and made it ready. He has also prepared for himself deadly weapons. He makes his arrows fiery shafts. Behold, he travails with wickedness, and he conceives mischief and brings forth falsehoods. Up to this point in the psalm, David has called for God to confirm his innocence and provide refuge from his enemies. He does this confidently because he knows the nature of God. But how will God act on David's behalf? And that's where David wrote that God is a just God. Using military language, David described God as a mighty warrior, because the strength of man pales in comparison to the strength of God. His enemies were the ones who should have been afraid. David may have been hiding, but the tables would soon be turned. Inescapable judgment was coming. In contrast to the strength and righteousness of God, David's enemies were weak and wicked. although they devised schemes to capture their foe, their efforts would fail. They hand out some sheets, which are kind of as we get towards the end of chapter 7. Okay. There's some applications and some questions that we'll answer. When we stop to consider the possible historical settings of this psalm, we find that both King David and Absalom lost their lives because of conflict with David. Regardless of which persecution prompted the son of Jesse to write Psalm 7, his words apply equally to both situations. Read verse 15, chapter 7, Psalm 7:15. He has dug a pit and hollowed it out. He has fallen into the hole which he made. His mischief will return upon his own head, and his violence will descend upon his own, upon himself. Sometimes we dig our own hole, we fall into it. I guess that's what it's saying is we can be our own worst enemy, and we can create problems that come back on us. And indication is that's what happened with King Saul and with Absalom. Verse 17, I will give thanks to the Lord according to his righteousness, and will sing praise to the name of the Lord Most High. The sheet I handed out, let's take a look at that on the applications. Number one, David's description in Psalm 7:1 of the safety God provides is echoed through the scripture. For example, Psalm 46:1-3 declares, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, even though the earth be removed, and though the mountains be carried into the midst of the sea, though its waters roar and be troubled, though the mountains shake with its swelling. Whether we find ourselves in peril because of our enemies or environment, God's constant care calms our fears. With this in mind, Peter urged his readers, therefore humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time, casting all your care upon him, for he cares for you. Why do you think it's so difficult for leaders in our world today to strictly or consistently conduct themselves in a Christian manner? Even, many of some of our presidents have indicated that they were Christians. Why do you think leadership at times has difficulty being consistent in moral and Christian behavior?
Self-interest,
Self-interest,
yeah, and power.
power,
Once they get into a position of power and see what a great thing it is for them,
yeah,
they aren't willing to give that up for any reason. And they're willing to do whatever it takes to maintain that position. And that not only applies to our president, that applies to most of our political leaders. These guys and gals who stay around for 40 years, there's a reason why they do that.
yeah.
They don't want to give up the power and all the perks that go with it.
All the money, all the different things. You know, it's a difficult thing to be in authority and to be in power. And, you know, I mentioned previously, even being receiving too much praise can be difficult if you're have too much money. All those things can be good if you use them for good. But with those things comes the risk of bad behavior, because you feel like you can get away with bad behavior. You can exercise your power, and it's a difficult thing to not want things your own way. We all like to have our own way with things in this world, and when we're not forced to compromise, we don't always compromise. It's a difficult thing, and that's part of what's being taught here too. Let's look at the second application. Like Job before him, David did not hesitate to proclaim his innocence. You know, that was interesting in the book of Job. Again, I like the book of Job. You got all these chapters where Job and his friends are having all these discussions. And the friends who are starting out, they're trying to help Job. He's having difficulty understanding why things are not going well for him. He doesn't accept their input, their criticism. He proclaims his innocence throughout the entire book. And there's a lot of lessons there for us in those discussions that go back and forth. Many of Job's friends' comments were very valid comments, but Job did not receive them well because he felt like he was being unjustly punished. And when we look at the, I'm going to take a look at that. Late in the book of Job, well, he did not lose his faith throughout all the adversity that he had, and that's a really good thing. You look at Job 42. Then Job answered the Lord and said, I know that you can do all things, and that no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore I have declared that which I did not understand, things too wonderful for me, which I did not know. Hear now, and I will speak. I will ask you, and you instruct me. I have heard of you by the hearing of the ear. Job's confession is at the end. God's in control. And I almost felt like throughout the book of Job, he hung on to his innocence a little too strongly along the way. But he did show that he was faithful and that he did not lose his faith. But anyhow, the book of Job teaches a real lesson also, that we like to proclaim our innocence throughout all the applications and things that happen in our life. But we need to remember God's in control, and we don't always make the right decisions. And we do the best we can, we keep our faith, and we forgive ourselves when we make mistakes along the way. But God's in control. Peter made this point when he wrote, "Yet if anyone suffers as a Christian, let him not be ashamed, but let him glorify God in this manner." Let's look at the questions on the other side of the sheet. From whom did David want God to save him?
If I had to pick somebody, I'd pick Saul.
Yeah, probably Saul, but Absalom. He had lots of enemies, didn't he? But David was a man after God's own heart. Did a lot of tremendous good things. We've never had to slay Goliath, but David, as a young man, went right into it without any question and gave God the glory. Tremendous courage, but later in life, David got off track too. But David recognized his errors and always turned back to God. What did David believe his enemies intended to do?
Kill him.
Kill him. Yeah. I mean, they wanted to do him in.
And he was right.
He was right. They did want to kill him. What specific things did David deny doing? Well, he didn't feel like, in the case of Saul, he felt like he was actually a good servant, a good follower of Saul, a friend to Saul. When he had a chance to kill Saul, he did not. He felt like he did not treat Saul incorrectly. Yet Saul treated him incorrectly and tried to kill him. So he was innocent of what Saul was. But Saul was reacting out of jealousy, wasn't he? When they sang the songs about David killing his 10,000s and Saul his thousands, that lit the fuse for jealousy and concern that someone was going to take his place. What did David say should happen if he were found guilty?
Be punished.
He should be punished. He should be corrected. Yeah. What did David want the congregations of people to hear?
His integrity.
Integrity?
That they would be judged.
That sooner or later it comes back, judgment, whether it's in this life or the next life. Let's look at number 7. How did David describe God? A righteous judge, a God who has indignation. And lastly, what is the end result of wickedness? Wickedness comes back on you sooner or later. If we play in the street, we get hit. But in the long run, good behavior and Christian behavior has great blessings in this life and the promise of eternity in the next life. And that's one of the primary teachings here is let's correct ourselves along the way in this life, but let's keep our eye on the next life, because that's the final goal.
The scripture reading today is Ephesians 6, 1 through 3. Children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that it may be well with you and that you may live long on the earth.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Steve, for leading songs. That was fantastic. And had not heard that communion song. It was really good. We need to sing that more often. Connor, thanks for the opening prayer on Spur of the Moment. John, thank you for Lord's Supper Spirit on Spur of the Moment. And thank you, Caleb. No one even knows how nervous you really were. And of the visitors who are here this morning, I am not the normal, regular pulpit minister. If you heard in the announcements, our full-time pulpit minister is at home, not feeling well due to the circumstances that he's under. But, so with that being said, be gentle and understanding. As Caleb read, he actually read from Ephesians 6, which essentially says the same thing when you get to verse 2 and 3. But we are going to be talking about that particular commandment today. Why did I pick that commandment? It just seems like lately, everywhere I look around, every time I turn around, I am witnessing poor behavior by children to their parents at stores, at doctor's offices, in restaurants, kids rebelling and talking back to coaches on fields. Horror stories that I hear in regards to kids, how they treat teachers in the classroom. I've even witnessed employees at places of business talking back to and or refuting their bosses and managers. And I'm like, what is going on? And though that might be dawning on me today, you may have said the same thing 10 years ago, or 20 years ago, or 150 years ago. But for me, it's been very relevant. That's not the right word. It's been very obvious to me lately as I look around, and I'm just wondering, what is this cause? Why is this happening more readily? And it got me to thinking about this particular commandment, which is to honor your father and mother. When you think about the 10 Commandments, 8 of the 10 say, don't do this and don't do that, and don't do this and don't do that, as in kill, steal, lie, covet, adultery, worship idols, use God's name in vain. But this commandment is actually one that we are to actually do something. It is actually saying to do something, not to not do something. And it involves an engagement. It involves a commitment. It involves thinking. You have to engage in regards to how it is that you are going to honor your mother and father. There is an engagement required with this particular commandment. It obviously was important to God. It's read first initially in Exodus 20:12 in the Ten Commandments brought down by Moses at Sinai. It's repeated again in Deuteronomy 5:16. It's referenced by Jesus twice in the New Testament. In Matthew, I always forget this, Matthew 15:4 and Matthew 19:19, Jesus referenced this commandment at the time. And again, it's referenced and used and written to children by Paul in both the letter to the Ephesians as well as the letter to the Colossians. So obviously it was a core principle in the Old Testament times as well as the New Testament times, as if God knew that this was going to be needed, as if God knew that this was going to be a challenge at times and a requirement at times to be made and to look right in his eyes. So what does it mean? Let's get to what honor actually means. The Oxford English Dictionary says that honor means to regard with great esteem and respect. It also says to fulfill or keep an agreement or an obligation. To hold with high esteem and to fill an obligation. Both of which is the description of how it is that you are to honor a parent. So in honoring a parent, it's essential that we show respect, we accept their authority, we obey them, and we appreciate them. There's many, many reasons that I could have listed down here today in regards to why is it that God chose to put this commandment as a commandment. But luckily, I only chose 3 points of topic for you today. It could literally be 10. My first reasoning. Just swipe. I knew it. I knew this would happen to me. My first point of topic, I titled Gratitude and Appreciation. But before we actually get into talking about gratitude, thankfulness, and appreciation, I thought we should take a step back and go to the beginning. Where did this all start? I think the answer is found in Genesis 1:26 through 28. You don't have to turn there if you want. I'm going to read it real quickly. First chapter of Genesis, after the creation, as part of the creation, God says, "Then God said, let us make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea and the birds of the air, and over the cattle, and over all the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. And God created man in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them. And God blessed them and said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it." Parenting takes the pattern from God himself. God created the idea of parenting. And I should have led off by saying, what made God decide to create and nurture new life, infants brought to the earth, through parents, which is what I just read. I believe is part of where it all began, as the pattern given to us through him. Parents become the first people a child sees, feels, touches, begins to trust and depend on and learn from, and on and on and on. Parenting, on the other side of the equation, is, as you know, all of us here, outside of the children, all of us here are parents. Older parents, middle-aged parents, and some younger parents. I don't need to sit here and tell you how it is that and what's involved in parenting. But I am going to do so a little bit so I can make my point. The parenting process starts at birth, from feeding, nurturing, taking care of their every need, healing them when they're hurt, taking care of them when they're sick, providing for them in every way possible, from housing, clothing, food, love, care, everything, as you already know. In addition to that caring process through their developmental phases, from infancy to adulthood, it's also where we teach them everything that they need to know. We're teaching them at the point when they can actually start to comprehend and understand. At that level, we begin teaching. Words, walking, potty training, down the line reading, etc., etc., etc. Life's lessons along the way here on earth. In addition to those teachings, it's also the same time at the point when they can comprehend and understand, we start teaching about God. We start teaching godly things. We start teaching Bible things, stories that they can understand, characters within the Bible that they can understand and like, the rights and the wrongs, the good and the bads. We start providing that along the way when they're able to start comprehending. We're told, and we're, forgot the word I want to use. Solomon says that very thing to us in Proverbs 22:6. This advice from Solomon goes right along with what I just said in regards to how we are to teach a child in the way of the Lord when they're young. Proverbs 22:6 says, "Train up a child in the way he should go, and even when he becomes old, he will not depart from it." It's essentially saying that if you give them a chance and you instill what they need to know in regards to God and godly ways and godly statutes and commandments and will, they'll keep that, they'll learn that, they'll know that, they'll apply that. If, by chance, someone strays and falls away, being taught at an early age gives them a chance and an understanding to come back to it at some point in time. It's not a promise. It's a recommendation. But the likelihood that a child will come back if they strayed is better having been taught right and wrong versus not have been taught anything. So Solomon gives us phenomenal advice within the book of Proverbs. Now, getting to gratitude and appreciation, with all that it is that parents do for children from birth till forever, a child at some point should start to see, start to recognize, start to understand everything that a parent has done for them. Start to develop an attitude of gratefulness and thankfulness and appreciation for everything that a parent has done, is doing, and will continue to do. It's that same feeling and development and attitude of appreciation and thankfulness and gratefulness that one would have not only to parents, but in life, to anyone in general. It's the same developmental attitude that we would need to have in regards to how we treat others, how we think in regards to appreciation, which essentially having the attitude of thanksgiving to God for what all He's done for us and promised us. But learning and developing this attitude of thankfulness and gratefulness from their parents, like I said, it's in recognition to the parents' love and to the parent sacrifice that's taken place over the years. So how could that be? What could that possibly be? Showing honor would be simply a child saying, "Thank you." Thank yous go so far. A simple thank you can go so far. Parents don't want anything in return. Parents aren't looking for reimbursement for whatever. They just like to hear the word thank you. or showing appreciation. You've been given the opportunity to do something. You've been given you've been given a gift. You've been allowed to do this. You've been given that. Showing appreciation is great for a parent. It's better than what a lot of times you may witness in regards to this feeling of, or this expectation of entitlement, or I deserve that, or my friends get that, or. Oh, and by the way, this is not a lesson to the Wolf family. This is a lesson in general, based on what I said earlier about what I see. This is not me throwing my children under the bus. Could I? But I won't. How about doing a chore for a parent without being told or asked? Goes a long way. How about showing love to a sibling instead of fighting and bickering, and challenging and irritating? How about speaking highly of your parents as opposed to badly of your parents? How many times have you walked by and you've heard kids in a group talking badly about their parents? Oh, can't stand them. They don't know anything. They make me clean my room and take out the trash. And on and on. That's gentle. That's nothing in comparison to what they're actually thinking and saying that I've heard. But that's only 5 examples. This list could be 25. But that's ways of showing honor to parents through appreciation and gratefulness and thankfulness. But let me ask a question, don't answer out loud. Does honoring parents ever end? It does not. It only changes some. A younger parent grows older. A child grows older. Their parents grow older. That honoring never ends. It may change. An older person's needs change. A younger child who's now older will honor them through things that they may need or need help with, etc., etc., etc. One story to back that point up in regards to honoring a parent never ends is this. And I will try to start speeding up because boy, does time can get away from you. But Alex speaks till noon, so I have plenty of time. When I was 26, my sister younger, we were able to witness. Said this wouldn't happen. Shouldn't happen. My grandfather at 91, my dad's dad at 91, was diagnosed with a mass in his large intestine that needed to be removed. So it was. The mass was removed and the large intestine was reconnected, reattached. It was a successful surgery, even at 91, even 28 years ago, where technology wasn't where it is today. Fantastic, came out of it doing fantastic. However, in the process of removing the intubation tube, they damaged the mechanism in his throat that affects your swallowing. So the process of introducing food back into his system was delayed because of the mechanism being damaged. He was fed through a PICC line and intravenously. somewhere along the line, there was miscommunication with the doctors and nurses, and food got introduced too soon. And he choked, and he aspirated into his lungs, causing a cascading of problems, as you know, Bill, of which now you have to attend to. In the meantime, you're not getting nourished like you should. You're not getting up and moving about and trying to build strength as you should, etc., etc. It was essentially the beginning of the end. Can't look that way. I'll save the long story. Within about 3 weeks, it went downhill. It was the beginning of the end due to that issue. But the point of this story is that from the time of the surgery to the time in the hospital to a brief stint at home where he went backwards, being brought back to the hospital, and then eventually, and I don't remember them calling this, but I'm assuming eventually hospice. It was about 3 weeks, maybe 4, I don't know, somewhere in there. At never one moment of time was he not with my dad, my mom, my dad's sister, and her husband, his wife, my grandmother, us kids, coming when we could, but there was a 24-hour around-the-clock shift rotation between the 4 adults that never left his side. For comfort, for company, for help, for nurses, for fear, for whatever reason, there was always an adult with him 24/7 for those 3 or 4 weeks. It stood out. My point is, it stood out to me. It was an example that I remembered. Which is an honor of your parents. So thank you, Mom. Besides the fact she took care of her mom and my dad's mom, in addition to different situations, different circumstances until they passed. Now, moving forward into my second point, I titled it Respect of Your Parents and the Respect of Authority. As I transitioned into this, it's not as simple and as happy as the first is in regards to showing appreciation and thankfulness. It's a little more serious. There's a little more involved. It's the phase now where there's rebellion and there's pushback and there's the stuff that starts happening that now we are seeing in the community, in society. And it is due to disobedience. It's the disobedience now that I'm referring to that is causing the disrespect and the disrespect for authority that starts happening at this time frame. Now let's call it what you will. Let's call it what you want. Let's call it, I have a strong-willed child. Let's call it the adolescent days, whatever you want. But it is the period of time where this rebellion and this pushback starts to happen. Evidently, it was going to happen, or we wouldn't have had the 6 different verses I referenced earlier, and I may be even missing a couple. Re-explaining and reminding us that there was going to be issues from time with parents and children, and it's usually this phase of life. I'm going to call it the older child. I'm not talking about the littles. The littles are taught along the way. They're innocent and pure, and they love and care. But they are taught along the way, and that's where their discipline starts, by being told no and so forth. I'm not here to talk about discipline. I'm here to talk about honoring. But I'm talking about the older kids at this point in time, where these different rebellions begin. In Ephesians 6, 1 through 3, what Caleb read for us, it says this. Again, children, obey your parents in the Lord, for this is right. He repeats now the Exodus verse. Honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with a promise, so that you may live long, so that it may be well with you, and that you may live long on this earth. Parents are the first people we as children encounter with the rule of God over us. Parents are the first people now at this point in time where they're realizing that when they encounter us, we have the rule of God over us, God over them, that was given to parents. Not in a tyrannical way, not in a militaristic way, but just an authoritative way. We see again in Colossians 3:20, Paul writes, "Children, be obedient to your parents in all things, for this is well-pleasing to the Lord." So again, evidently Paul saw that there was an issue or concern going on. Maybe he's witnessing these various things as he's traveling the world, going from cities to cities, countries to countries. Maybe he was witnessing this, or maybe it was just the inspiration from God to remind us to honor our parents. Obey our parents, which is the honoring. By obeying our parents, children have a respect for them and for their authority, which is honor. The opposite, when children do not obey, they essentially do not have respect for their parents or their authority, which has been given to them by God. They tend to forget that. Proverbs 1, let's see if I did this. Oh yeah. Proverbs 1:10, again, a nice thing from the wise man Solomon. He says in verse 1 of 10, "A wise son makes a father glad, but a foolish son is a grief to his mother." Now there's positive and negative in that. I'm making this verse a positive. The wise son, the one who listens, the one who obeys, the one who has a fear of the Lord, which causes the do right in him, makes a father glad, makes a mother glad. The opposite, the foolish son who does not do these things, or daughter, gives grief to a parent, brings strife and stress, brings them down. But again, this is the positive one of the two. One who obeys brings happiness and gladness to the parents. The second is the opposite. Proverbs 30:17 says, "The eye that mocks a father and scorns a mother, the ravens of the valley will pick it out, and the young eagles will eat it." That's a warning. That's a judgment warning there, that if you were to live your life like this, that is not pleasing to the Lord in regards to how you're treating a parent, what you think of a parent. Just another bit of advice from Solomon in regards to the fact that God does not like that if one were to treat a parent that way throughout life. If we refuse to obey at home, we will be that much more likely to disobey teachers, coaches, bosses, authority figures like police, government officials, and ultimately God himself. Here's a quote I came across in my study from a man named Herman Bavinck. He was an evangelist in the 1800s. That's all you need to know. He was an evangelist in the 1800s. But I liked what he wrote. Listen to what he said. It backs up kind of what I was just saying in regards to respect for authority. A person's becoming human occurs within the home. Here the foundation is laid for the forming of the future man and woman, of the future father and mother, of the future member of society, of the future citizen, of the future subject of the kingdom of God. So in the 1800s, he literally said, the teaching begins at home early, and it forms the person that one will become that's right in the community and right with God. To back this up even further, and I'll start speeding this along, to back this up even further, we see the same principle throughout the New Testament. I'm going to change the wording though. It's not just honoring not just respecting authority and authority figures, people who have authority over us. I'm changing the word to submission. We are to submit. We see the word submit often through the New Testament. The honor we show our parents is the same honor Christian wives show their husbands in marriage. Ephesians 5:22, 1 Peter 3:1. Congregants, members, show to elders in the church. Hebrews 13:17, 1 Timothy 5:17. Citizens to the rulers and the authorities. 1 Peter 2:13 through 16. And ultimately, honoring everyone, which is the conclusion of that. 1 Peter 2:17, where he says, honor all men, honor the brotherhood. And I was supposed to put that in my notes, and I didn't. Because it was like 4 quick phrases of how he ends that 4 verses. But ultimately he's saying we actually honor everyone in mankind and the brotherhood. So you can see that it was essential that we respect authority and those placed in authority positions over us. This was God's plan for peace and harmony. Otherwise, it would be chaotic. It would be anarchy. It would be rebellion everywhere, constant strife. We see a lot of that today as we speak. Lastly, my last point. It'll be my quickest point. It's the most important point, but it should be the most understandable. It should be the most to get through. It's really quite simple. None of these points that I put down today are actually super complicated. It's actually very simple. It wasn't a deep, confusing theology type of a lesson. But essentially, honoring parents is honoring God. That's where it all comes down to. Like I said earlier, it requires an engagement. There's something that has to be done on our part in doing so. And then you can obviously read this, but what was it that Jesus said in regards to commandments? He said that if you love me, you will keep my commandments. Also in 1 John 2:4, John also said, the one who says, I have come to know him and does not keep my commandments is a liar, and the truth is not in him. It is very easy to say I love God and I love Jesus. Everyone does. And I believe they do in the world. But he tells us straight up in 2 verses, and I'm sure there's others, that love is demonstrated through obedience to him and his commandments and his will. It's an active form of love. It's an action on our part that has to occur. If we aren't keeping his commands, we are saying that we really don't love God. If we do not obey, respect, or submit to our parents, we are not submitting to, showing respect to or for, and not showing reverence to God. They go hand in hand. If you're doing these things for your parents, you are doing these things for God. That's the correlation. It's very simple. I placed it lastly, so that it basically comes down to our commitment to God. Honoring our parents is about honoring God, first, not only because he told us to do so, but also because honoring him honoring them, the parents, builds a wider and deeper channel for our hearts in honoring Him, honoring God. I've said a lot already. Could also even be becoming a little redundant. So essentially that is the lesson of showing appreciation and gratitude to your parents, showing respect to them and a respect for their authority as well as other people placed with authority over us, and essentially honoring God. Honoring your parents is honoring God. I will, though, conclude with one more quick little discussion. I want to talk about my dad. Those who are family here know him, obviously. There may be a handful of you that might have met him a time or two. But there's a very good chance that no one knew my dad. Maybe a couple. He was taken from us 4 years ago this past February 10th. 4 years, just like that. He was taken from us unexpectedly, very quickly. He was healthy. He had many years to go. And it is what it is. Something took him quickly and unexpectedly. But I'm here to say, though, he was fantastic. He was a great dad. You would have liked him. Fun, funny, caring, did everything that you would want in a dad. He was always there, never missed. Constantly wanting to help. Help. Family, relatives, friends. Always serving, always willing to help. Always listening. Became very patient. He became very gentle as he aged. But when putting this together, what dawned on me was that, as I said earlier in regards to how parents teach kids along the way, he taught along the way. Often. And he wanted us to know how to do things. And what I came to realize is that he was always right. He was always right. He was always right. Now I wish I just had one more opportunity to honor him. With that being said, that he was taken unexpectedly should be a reminder to us that we are not guaranteed tomorrow. Jesus taught many parables in regards to being prepared, being ready. We were told he's going to be told to come and get us. And it will be as if it's a thief in the night. We need to be ready at all costs. We could leave this building and be taken in a car accident. We could leave this building and Jesus could return in 20 minutes. With that being said, if there's anyone here today that feels like maybe they aren't in a right relationship with God and feels that maybe they need to be in a right relationship with God, or if there's anyone contemplating the need to be forgiven by being immersed in Christ's blood and being immersed into the water for forgiveness of the sins, if that is anything that anyone may be contemplating here today, I invite you to do so. So like my dad who got taken prior to us expecting, if that is something that's on someone's mind, and if there's anybody here today that is in need for that need, please come forward as we stand and sing this invitation.